All right, welcome back to the show this week where we have an outstanding guest. Our guest today is Hunter Price. He's a former basketball coach turned speaker, author, podcast host, focused on helping leaders build stronger cultures through connection. Over 10 plus years of a coaching career, he worked at every level from youth to varsity head coach, and he earned many different honors while also setting multiple school records. Today, Hunter is the founder of V3 Content, centered on voice, vision, and victory, and host of multiple podcasts, including Share Your Story. His work blends faith, leadership, and sports to help coaches and leaders grow with intentionality and purpose. He is the author of the soon to be released, I don't think it's released yet, Care to Compete, a coach's guide to connection that wins the margins, a practical playbook for building culture through care, relationship, and daily habits that elevate teams. Hunter, thank you so much for taking and making the time to come on the podcast today.
John, this is such an honor for me. I stumbled onto your stuff online many moons ago, and I've really enjoyed following you. And it's been a goal of mine to pop on this podcast. And I will say, being on the other side of these interviews, I'm usually in the driver's seat. Being in the passenger seat is much more scary, I'll tell you.
For sure. I've got a couple of those this week, and I was thinking today that, like I do enjoy asking, and driving it. And I guess it's like my own vehicle. Like I don't like my wife to drive me around either. Like I like to drive, you know what I mean? At least it's in my control. Well, let me ask you this. I want to start with because I know you're a faith-based human, and I want to start with the issues that you have had in the past, and if you're human, you still have issues today with this one word that I think was the very first sin that ever entered the world when Lucifer just decided that, he was too prideful and that he wanted to be like God, and he kind of got shown the door. Like what have you learned about yourself and that word pride?
Well, sports is kind of a breeding ground for pride. I don't know
Mm,
how you go through a sports career and have even a modicum of success and don't struggle with pride. And I think pride is the biggest stumbling block for coaches altogether. And I think you would agree in that my way is the best way. No one else can help me but myself, or maybe your assistants don't have a voice. Maybe your players don't feel free to do what they know how to do because you want it done your way exactly. And I think it's an ultimate stumbling block. And for me, I've gone through the roller coaster of a coaching career, John. I've gone through horrible seasons. I've gone through very successful seasons. And at the end of the day, none of them mattered. At the very end of the day, the only thing that really mattered was what value I imparted into those boys in my locker room and the coaches and my staff, because that's what we talk about to this day. We don't talk about, I don't call up old players and coaches and go, hey, remember that game on December 12th where we won by 12 and we weren't supposed to? It's, man, wasn't basketball just such a special time in our lives? And knowing that and stepping away from it, it does make me a little sad knowing that I put such a emphasis on the winning when I was in it. I think every coach, it might help them out to step out of it for a year almost to see. And I say all that to say that pride impacted me so much that I didn't see the most valuable parts when I was in it. The wins became all that mattered, and the losses were the end of the world. And I think that
mm.
all boils down to pride.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think, one of I think the best traits or most common behavior skills of some of the most successful coaches and leaders in the world today is this word called humility, which to me is almost, the exact opposite of pride. Pride is all about me. What can I get, right? And I'm like you, I have 100% been on both sides of that, as a coach. I have lived the life of it was all about the ball, right? But then as you transition in this world and try to become more transformational, you understand that your impact is not necessarily the ball, right? Like it is, like what are you doing for the young people, right? Like what are you instilling in them? What are the values that you're teaching them? And I have seen that. I mean, that's been a battle within, it just is, right? I mean, we put such a value on the scoreboard that sometimes things in life gets out of whack because we are compared to other people all the time. Social media has made that worse. It's not getting easier for our young people either because, that's the world that they live in. Why do you believe that connection is the real competitive edge?
So I use the word in the margins, and I think if you're in the field of coaching, you understand what that means innately, even though it's not really defined in a sports dictionary. It's just doing the things that not everyone is willing to do to win games. So it's communicate. In basketball, it's take a charge. In football, it's chase down a play that's across the field. There's something in the margins of every single game, and I think the way to win games, if you're not as talented, I was at a school that I just didn't have the talent. I was never going to be as good as the schools in Milwaukee. We were right outside the Milwaukee area, and we were in a rural community that had some farm kids. Our tallest kids were like 6'2", 6'3". We were never going to outscore a team that we played in the playoffs. But I realized if I could just out everything else, if we could out prepare, out
Mm.
hustle, out communicate, out love, we can win these games. And what I realized, what it really boiled down to, John, was the only chance we had was if we loved each other. Because when you love each other and you buy into the same mission, you're going to do those things innately. Like, I don't have to talk you into, hey, Billy, I really need you to take a charge. You're killing us out there. I don't have to do that if you care about me as your coach and you care about your teammates that are out there. You just do it. So we spend so much time trying to coerce or talk into or game plan that we don't focus on the central thing is they've got to care about you and each other and the name on their jersey first and foremost, because if not, you can forget all that. So I think if you're a coach right now listening, you're like, we just can't compete with the other big dogs in our division, our conference, whatever it might be. Start with the hearts in your locker room, because if you can out everything else, I promise you, you will compete.
Yeah, for sure. And what made me think about, or what I thought about when you were saying that was, in the Atomic Habits book, when they do the little study on the bicycling, Olympic bicycling team. I don't even remember the country, but what they tried to figure out was what's a way that we can get better in a bunch of different things where it may not be the actual person riding the bicycle as much as it is the little 1% fraction. So the margins, how can we get better? And I had a coach one time gave a Devo and he talked about if everybody just got this much better, just an inch, and you put all those inches together, we are a lot better in a competitive team sport. And Dr. Gilbert, one of my mentors, has always told me the best team don't ever win. It's the team that plays best that wins, right? And how you play is pretty important, and that's where you're talking about the margins, being connected to each other, being a teammate, playing for something better than yourself. The most talented team don't always win. They just don't, I mean, you can go any sport in the world, right? And find upsets that happen all the time because maybe their why, maybe the little margins in their play or in their team is a little bit different. Where do you think a lot of coaches today get it wrong? Like, where do you think they missed the boat?
The number one thing I hear today in any coaches meeting I walk into is kids these days. Kids these days and their technology, kids these days and their attitude, kids these days. My problem with that is, yes, it's annoying, but we were all kids these days at one point. At some point, we were teenagers and our coaches were sitting in a locker room or a meeting room and going, kids these days, I just can't stand X, Y, or Z. And we all turned out okay. So every generation has their version of kids these days. And we can't allow that to become that to take up so much residence in our mind that we just can't get over it and we almost just let crap happen because it's just going to happen because the kids suck. That's just not
Mm.
the way the world works, and it's become an epidemic in any coach meeting room I've gone into. I can promise you this. Oh, if I was a kid and I had the video games they have today, I would be playing them too. They're awesome. Have you seen them? I mean, my goodness.
Yes.
So you can't say like I wouldn't have. That's the first thing. And the second thing is now that you know that kids these days, dot, 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 how are you going to adapt? How are you going to adjust? We can't just complain. And if you're going to spend all this energy complaining, you might as well get out of coaching because it's not going to change.
Hmm. Hunter, I'm gonna tell you what I think the number one problem is that I see, and I'm gonna go back to the word pride. When you have to constantly blame somebody else because you're not getting what you want out of your season, out of your, whatever. When you got to blame and say, these kids these days, I think it's a direct reflection of the pride in that individual because I would argue the kids these days are absolutely no different than they were in the 70s and the 80s. Okay. Like, I mean, in the 80s, I don't know if you remember, you don't remember because you weren't born in the 80s. Okay. But in the 80s, we had these things called boom boxes came out, right? You could actually take your radio with you, put it on your shoulder, and walk around with some battery powered music, right? That's what coaches said then, man. What about these kids that carry them boxes around? Like it's no different, right? Adults play on the phone today, 50 years ago, 60, 70 years ago when, they were reading newspapers. It was still distraction, right? Like the distractions change, but people, man, kids are kids. Like kids want to be led, kids want to be coached. Now, are they smarter? Probably. Well, I think if they're smarter, then we have to be smarter. So if maybe we're not smart enough to coach these kids these days, then it still goes back to, that may be a coach problem, right? Because, kids are kids, man. Like they want to be led, they want to be coached, they want to be directed, and they want to play hard. They want to do the things that they can do to be successful. They just need people that can help lead them down that way. Let's
Can I
talk about the
tell?
book real quick. Go ahead. Go ahead.
And I just want to add the most frustrating thing I hear, I'm sitting on sidelines watching games now, is when a coach will yell, "We practiced this. How did you screw it up?" That's the number one thing that drives me crazy. Because what is
Yeah.
that saying? It's you or your pride going, I don't want anyone in the fans to blame me. I showed them what to do. They're screwing it up, the children. And
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that because that's my biggest thing that
Yeah.
coaches say.
You know what, Hunter? And I've been there. Like I have lived that life when I would be so mad at the quarterback for throwing an interception that I would just belittle, be loud, embarrassing. And you know what? It really was about pride. It really was. Like I'm, whether you know it or not, you're trying to take it off of you and throw it on somebody else when in reality, like what good does that do the team or the player? You know what I mean? Like it doesn't do any good. And what I learned to do for the most part, now there may be people that tell you I still fail from time to time, and I do. Nobody's perfect. But what I've tried to trade is this becoming furious for more, becoming fascinated. Instead of making statements, ask questions. Why did he throw the interception? Why did he jump off sides? Right? Like, let's make it an education, and let's learn how to improve it instead of when you start throwing out those statements and you start getting you're not adding value, like figure out why, right? And when you figure out why, then let's try to correct it and move on. And, so I appreciate you saying that. I see that and it just tickles me sometimes. Like I don't like to see it out of our coaches, but I love seeing it out of other teams because I know, man, when you see that going on, like we're gonna beat them, we just are. Let's fast forward a little bit to the book. Care to compete. What does that actually mean and why, those two words together, care and compete?
Well, writing a book is challenging, and one of the odd hurdles I found was the title. And I Googled so many different titles. Is
Sure.
this a book? And there's been millions of books written. So I was like, I need something super unique that's no other thing. And my wife and I were playing with names. And the whole premise of the book is to care. And we talked about that, so I don't want to rehash it. But um, I realized that the disconnect in any locker room I've been in is that the word care in the English language has too broad of a spectrum. I care about pizza. I care about my kids. I care about the Green Bay Packers. I care about my wife. I care about the Milwaukee Bucks. I care about my church. I could say that about all these things, but they all mean something significantly
Mm,
different. And when I realized that, I had the biggest aha and why I wrote a book is that you have to realize, you have to have your team realize what it means to care about you. If you're the team name's the Eagles, what does it mean to care about the Eagles? Because we wonder, why is this group not showing up? Why is this group not communicating? Why is this group not together? It's probably because they don't actually think there's a problem with the way they do care. So the book is structured in a unique way where I kind of go through personality types of what it means to care and that sort of thing. And the second half is application. But what it boils down to is if you really want to compete, like if you truly want to compete for a state championship, a conference title, whatever it is to you, your team has to care about each other because we've seen so many teams have high talent and low production. The realistic reason behind that is probably because they care about themselves more than the team. They care about their stats. They care about things only if they're going well and not all the time. So I think it's a double entendre there. It might seem like, do you care to compete? But no, the meaning is it is if you really want to compete, like you truly have to care about each other.
okay. So I know in the book, you go through four different levels of care. And I guess that's what stood out to me was, the question that if I was to ask, we worked out this morning before school, and if I was to call the team up and say, how many of you care about this team? Every single person, right, is going to put their hand up. Well, do they all care? Maybe, right? Maybe some care at a one and some care at a 10, right? Like maybe so you did, kind of put this level to it, So I ain't asking you to give the book away because they're gonna buy the book anyway because it's really good. But what are the different levels? Like how do you define or how do you, when you see a team, how would you start trying to pick out, the level one guy from the level five guy? You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying. It really boiled down to me to work ethic and coachability, and it goes into deep detail of that in the book. I think there's a lot of people who think if they're coachable, then that means I truly care about this team, but they don't work hard. It's like the group of kids who, if you said, "Do you know where the light switches are in the gym?" They might not even know because they've never been there first or last to turn the
Mm,
lights off.
yeah, for sure.
you know. But because if you correct them, they say, yes, coach. And on the bench, they cheer for their team and they're overall supportive of their teammates and friends. They would say, yes, I care. My hands up. I care about this team. And I would go, hold on. Not so fast. You have not come to a single workout all summer. So how much do
Sure.
you really care? And that's really what it came down to for me is distinguishing all those categories of if someone cares a lot to work hard, but they don't care enough to be coachable, vice versa, if they're somewhere in the middle of both, or if they're at the very end of the spectrum, which is like the best case scenario for I care a ton because I'm super coachable. I care about my teammates. I care to lead well. I care to do all the intangibles. And I also work super, super hard and I'm skilled. That's one thing that I think coaches are afraid to say. You can't be a leader on a team if you're not good because we need you on the field to be a leader. Like it does you no good if the player at the end of your bench is your best vocal leader. There's got to be some
No doubt.
tangible work ethic and skill there. So I sat on it for a long time, John, and I was like, how would I split this up? Because I love personality assessments. I'm obsessed with them. And I think it helps people imagine um, it better. It helps them picture it better. So I gave it to us coaching staff here in Springfield, Illinois, and I got a text back a week later, and they said, Hunter, I don't know what you did to us, but we sat in the weight room and we looked at every kid, and all of us were just like pointing out, all right, that kid's a sloth, that kid's a vortex, that kid's a heartbeat. And I just think it's a fun way to acquire information, but it all boils down to how coachable are you, and then how hard do you work.
Yeah, you know what? That's really, really good. And I did like because, I started thinking the same thing. I can pick out those kids that are in each category and we all got them, okay? So as a coach, our one of our goals is to try to transform our kids into something even more than they think they can become. How do we move kids? What kind of advice would you give for me to try to move a sloth to the next level? You know what I'm saying? Like, first of all, can we move kids, right? That would be a big question in my mind. And then the second question is, if we can, what type of things would give them a reason to move on their own? Because they have to decide, I mean, honestly, they have to decide. Now, they might be, pushed, encouraged, to move, but they do have to make a decision. What do you think about that?
This was probably the biggest debate in my test group. I've got some awesome coaches in this group, and we do a Bible study together. And I kind of went through the book ideas with them. There's probably five or six that have state championships, and four or five that have multiple. And I asked them, can all kids improve their level of selflessness and work ethic? So can we improve every kid on our team's level of care? And some said yes, and some said no. And I would say most. I would say most because there's some kids that it's unfortunate that life's going to have to kick in the butt before they care. And I'm just being
Sure.
real. Life is going to have to kick them in the butt for them to care. But I think most you can improve. I really do. And where it all starts with is understanding that there's got to be awareness that there's a problem. I think if you have a teacher you work with, if you're a teacher, if you're a coach, wherever, businessman, whatever it is, if you have a colleague that is just not improving their situation, the most probable explanation is that they don't think they have a problem.
Mm.
And I think some of the best leadership speakers I've heard in the last year or two have kind of hovered around this idea where we bang our heads. We go, why won't this kid just improve? Why won't he care more? Why won't he show up to workouts? The realistic scenario that you're dealing with is that he does not think he has a problem to begin with. He thinks he's working harder to begin with. So as a coach, what's that mean for us? Do we just go, okay, then he doesn't think he has a problem. Now I've got to disregard him. No, now it's on you to figure out how to have a conversation with every single person in your program, the coaches, the managers, the players, to be able to have a conversation about what their problems are. But that has to start with yourself. I tell coaches this all the time. You cannot stand up in front of your team and say, you guys suck at this, you suck at this, you suck at this, and expect them to respect that. Like you have to
Mm.
model that. You have to be a coach who says, you know what, I screwed up. I'm sorry. I ran this play. I thought it'd work, it didn't. Or maybe we weren't as prepared as we thought. Like you don't want to be so um, critical of yourself that makes people question your ability, but you want to model authenticity and humility.
Yeah.
Reason we don't goes back to your first question, that ultimate sin of pride. We don't want to admit that, hey, I might have gotten something wrong tonight. I remember there'd be a game every year where it was a really stressful ending and we lost a game we shouldn't have. And I could tell the boys were like really worked up. And I'd look at them and I'd say, guys, here's what I want you to do tonight. I want you to go home and when your parents ask what happened, I want you to tell them it was coach because it's my responsibility to bear this. It's not yours, your children, like your kids. Like if you need someone to take the blame for this, put it on me. I can handle it. I'm a grown man. But it all starts with that ability for you as a coach to be honest with your team, to be vulnerable. And once you are, it's kind of interesting. You'll start seeing the players start sharing their vulnerabilities as well. Have you ever had experience with that?
Oh, most certainly.
Yeah.
Most certainly. I think one of the things that you said that is number one, a problem for all of us, and that's self-awareness just in general. I believe 90% of the people in the world say they are, but the actual number is probably more like 10%. Like I think we all struggle with self-awareness. And then I also think this, when you start talking about moving kids and trying to move them from the sloth to the next level or level one to level two, a lot of times we don't connect with the kid, right? We don't connect with the other person. Like if you want to move somebody else, like you've got to get to know them. The old Billy Graham. I don't think it was Billy Graham. I don't know who said it, but nobody cares what you know until they know how much you care. Like that's true. I mean, that's a fact. So sometimes we as educators, we have issues with kids in our class, or we have issues with our kids on our team. But if you would ever just hit a reset button and go figure out why is that kid acting like they're acting, a lot of times you'll find the answer. And when you decide to reconnect with that kid, you can absolutely transform a kid, but you're not going to do it, if you're not using the skills necessary to connect, to care, because those are going to drive the engine, right?
Right.
When you think about teams that are successful and you think about your levels, can you win big without a heartbeat? And heartbeat being the guy that cares, the guy that commits, the guy that's all in for the team. Like, can you win without a heartbeat?
That's a fantastic question. That's a really good question, John. The word heartbeat comes from Coach K's book in the 1990s, Leading with the Heart, and he talked about how Bobby Hurley was his heartbeat of his team. So that's the name I associated with that top level of care of someone who is the heartbeat of the team. And in football, you may have a couple. I think in basketball, you probably have one, where it's like with this kid, we are rolling, we are humming. Without him, there's a clear difference, and you don't want to put that much on a kid, but it happens on every single team. I think it's possible. I think if your whole entire team is bought in as allies, I think it's definitely possible. Uh, but I would say when adversity comes, you're going to struggle without a heartbeat because when adversity happens in a locker room, they look to coach, obviously, but they're listening the most to the captains or the leaders or however you've identified that hierarchy on your team. Like, so if you have a kid tell a kid to show up to a workout, they're going to listen way more than if a coach tells a kid to show up to a workout.
Right.
It's just how kids work. So I think it's possible. I would say it's not probable if you don't have high level leaders in your locker room, you're probably going to struggle to get through adversity more than the average team.
Yeah, I agree. And the best teams that I've been a part of had a heartbeat. They may have had a heartbeat that was several, but I use this as an example. In 2017, we won the state championship, went 16-0, and there was no doubt that the heartbeat of the team was this kid named Tylen Knight, who was maybe 5'6.5", 178 pounds, and was the best football player in the state of Mississippi. And I often say this kidding, but I'm not kidding. If in the state championship game at halftime, if Tylen had walked in and said, "Boys, let's go load the bus and go home," I honestly believe them kids would have got on that bus and went home. They would have left me in that locker room because he was the heartbeat. He just was. And what I've learned is when the heartbeat is there, everybody else feeds off of the heartbeat. When the heartbeat's not there, maybe they're a great player, maybe they're super talented, but maybe they're not the heartbeat, right? Like that can be a struggle, and I think you still can win. I think you can still be really successful, but I think a heartbeat changes everything. And I don't remember what the book was. I'm drawing a blank right now, but the study where they went in and studied the best teams in the world, the best dynasties, and what they found out was it wasn't the star player that was the reason. It was the best teammate. They all had a Bill Cartwright, or they all had somebody that wasn't necessarily the Michael Jordan of the team, but they were 100% the heartbeat of the team. So I think it does make life better. Now I'm not going to say that you can't do it as you wouldn't. What's one thing that a coach could do tomorrow to build better connection with his players and or team?
I'd say you carve out time to do so. I think coaches think that team chemistry just happens, but no coach would ever say, I want my team to get stronger. So I'm just going to hope it happens throughout the season. You would schedule workouts, you would schedule lifts. If you want your team to be better at shooting or passing or hitting, whatever it is for your sport, you would put it in the practice plan. But when it comes to team culture, we'll go, our team is really divided right now. I really hope they get closer and kind of buy in together. Okay, let's go to practice. It's like
Yeah.
you plan out everything else, but you don't have a plan for your culture. And I think everyone needs a plan for their culture. And it could be something as simple as I think a PlayStation can instantly improve your team culture. I truly believe that. Go to a kid's house, have them turn on Madden, 2K, whatever it is, have a little tournament, pizza. Team dinners, I think, are fantastic. I think having intentional conversation before or after practice, hey, our word of the day, our word of the week, something I'm reading. I used to share my vulnerabilities with my team frequently. Um, I just thought it was healthy. I thought it was healthy for them to see that I bleed too, and I'm not perfect.
No doubt.
So I'd say that the biggest misnomer in team culture is that it just happens through some sort of amoeba effect when you really owe it to yourself and your program to plan that out in your calendar.
Mm, that's so good. And you said you went through about 10 or 12 or 14 different things that, are really good. And I kind of look at it like this as far as the culture of a team. And when, as you were saying all of the different things, the little interactions you can have with them, the classroom time you can have, the lessons you can teach them, all the different things. I look at it as, it's like a spigot that drips. I think everything matters. And to think that it doesn't matter, or to think that it's going to happen by chance, is ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think you have to be intentional and you have to drip on them all the time. But the goal is, if it drips long enough, eventually that bucket's going to overflow. And when your culture starts overflowing, you absolutely gain the benefit of, that comes with it, which is just outstanding behavior that doesn't ride, this confidence loop where, not when I feel good, I play good. When I feel bad, I play bad. You know what I mean? They're much more competent, and they play, in a more healthy way. And it's one of the things that I think we do a really good job of is, we are intentional about teaching the values that we think will make them productive men in this world. Now, those values are also the same values that we think will make you productive, on a football field too, but we are going to intentionally teach them, the skills of what it means to be a part of a family, what it means to work hard, to be tough, to be committed, to have a positive attitude. And all of those are trainable skills, all of them. And if you just leave it to chance, right? Now we're banking on, like, do their parents teach them? Because everybody don't win the parent lottery, right? So, we can't leave that to chance. Some of them have great parents, but some of them, have less than. So, like, we have to intentionally try to teach them the things that we think that it takes to be successful. Tell me what role, in your coaching, in your life now, as you're progressing through it, and still a relatively young guy. How old are you?
33.
Oh Lord, Jesus, you make me feel old. Tell me what the role of faith has played in your life, to this point, and how it continues to add value to you.
I mean, it's everything, John. I would not be where I'm at without God's protection and grace. If it was up to me, I would be in a corner, curl up in a ball somewhere. Um, I struggled with mental health most of my life. I was diagnosed with general anxiety disorder at 28, clinically depressed at 28. Um, I was miserable all the time, and it was just like a mask I'd wear. And they'd say, like, the happiest people are the saddest sometimes because they get real good at pretending.
Right.
And when COVID happened, I just like everyone else, I lost my vices, whether it's like go work out, go outside and walk, go socialize. Like, you're stuck with who you are, what you believe during COVID. I've been a believer my whole life. And I've got news for you. Mental health does not care if you're a believer or not. And I think spiritual attacks will happen even more so, but that's a longer story. Um, and I had to realize that my joy should not come through sports success. It should not come through my friends and family. My joy should not come through anything other than my purpose, which is a child of God. And my purpose is to spread the gospel. And only real joy can come from a relationship with the Lord, because everything else will go away and it'll dissipate, right? If your joy is in sports, you're going to have a heck of a time when you're winning, but when it's stressful, you're going to be miserable. So I
Mhm.
came across Second Corinthians 12, and it's Paul's message about, hey, God, I've had this thorn in my side, and I've asked you to remove it so many times, and you haven't. And I don't quite understand why. And he keeps on writing, and he gets to a point whenever he says, I've realized that my imperfections lead me to you. It leads me to your grace. And whenever I do succeed, then, and whenever I do thrive, then it shows how great you are, because I wouldn't be able to do this on my own fruition. So when I came to terms with that, I started thinking about it, John. And because of my anxiety, I didn't go out and party as a kid. I never tried drugs. I never like spent time with booze and all that stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, like God spared me through this thing that I begged him to remove my whole entire
Mm.
life. I've been spared through some serious trials. And also, I've had this amazing career now. that I would have never dreamt of having had I not been placed in the right time at the right place with the right people. So I spent my whole 20s cursing God and saying, like, how could you? How could I not find joy? How could I not find purpose? I'm winning all these basketball games and I'm still miserable. And turns out God's grace is the only true joy, the only true purpose that I need. Um, and you give a pastor a microphone and he's going to go forever. So I'll try to wrap it up here. But I just want people to understand that, like, if your joy is coming from something other than Christ, then it's only going to last for so long. It's going to be super temporary. So I wouldn't even call it joy. I'd call it happiness. And if you really are missing that, I'd love to have that conversation.
No doubt about it. I love what Nick Saban says about happiness, right? If you want to be happy, for an hour, eat a steak. If you want to be happy for a day, play golf. If you want to be happy for a week, take a vacation. Happiness will come to an end, right? True joy is found in something bigger than yourself, and that's when we go back and talk about the sins of pride versus, you know, caring and connecting, and living for a purpose bigger than yourself, right? Like, I've been that guy that thought that the end all be all was to win on Friday night, to be the best football team in the world, and think that, I'd say this: we won a state championship in 2017, right? And that's been like my mission my whole life. And I think, man, like, it's over. Like, I mean, this is it. Like, it ain't gonna get no better than this, right? And I wake up the next morning and my first thought was, what's for breakfast? And it was a very like depressing thought. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I guess this is just the way life, and then you get up and you start. It's never gonna be enough. You can never win enough. You can never make enough. If it is about things, and it's about possessions and it's about titles, there will never be enough. I keep on my phone, there's a 40-second clip. I don't know if you've seen it. I'll send it to you if you have not, but it's Sylvester Stallone talking about, once he made Rocky and got it to, and it was the big hit and all this, he gets to the top of the mountain and he's like, man, the top of the mountain is not what I thought it was going to be like. Like, I didn't take anybody with me. It wasn't all of this. It wasn't fulfilling. It wasn't, he climbed the wrong mountain. It's bottom line. Like, he climbed the wrong mountain, man. If you're going to put all your desires into things, you're always going to come up a little bit disappointed, I think, if that's, what you want to do. So I think that is, and I would challenge anybody listening today that if you want to go deeper in that, man, reach out to Hunter, and I know I would, and he would too, be more than willing to talk to you about, that part of your life. What do you do on a daily basis? Like, what do you have daily habits, daily things that you do to make sure that your mental capacity, your health, your mental health, your faith life stays strong? Do you have routines or systems that you use on a daily basis? If so, what would be a couple of them?
I think your mental, physical, and spiritual are all tied together. I truly believe that. So a big thing for me is starting the day off at the gym. And the reason is you get the physical and it makes you feel better, makes you think clearly. But when I'm at the gym, I go sit in the steam room, or I might swim at the YMCA. And what it does is it removes audio because I'm
Mm,
constantly listening to somebody or something. I'm a
yeah,
podcast junkie.
yeah.
Listen to them all day. I'll watch TV. I'll talk to my wife, my kids. There's constantly busyness in my ears all day. And going to the Y makes it so I have to, for a half hour, be in silence and just listen to myself, my own thoughts. And I usually have some of the best thoughts I have throughout my day after, doing that, which I find really good. I pray, uninterrupted, long prayers. I interrupt myself with my own wonderings in my mind sometimes, but I will get back on track. And, having time, setting aside time and quiet and today's society is such an underrated thing to do.
Mm.
I think other than things like, reading the Bible, listening to worship music, things that, are pretty standard in that realm. I think surrounding yourself with good Bible believing people, positive people, because you don't realize how much your community speaks into your thoughts. You might think they don't, but they do. How they influence you is pretty real. So I surround myself with people who are good, just solid people. I don't make time for. I'm 33. I know. I feel like I'm getting old. My knees hurt more, my elbows hurt more when I play basketball. But you would say I'm young, which I'm okay with. But I'm realizing how short and precious life is. I don't want to spend it with people who drain my energy. I don't want to spend it with people who are negative. I want to
Mm.
be uplifted by positive people. So I would say those are the two major things. Who are you surrounding yourself with and listening to? And are you removing audio from your ears at some point during the day, which is hard to do?
I think that's really good. I listened to a podcast here recently that Arthur Brooks, who's like the happiness doctor at Harvard or whatever, his podcast is Office Hours. And he did a podcast on when are we bored, right? Like, when are we bored? Well, Gen Z, they say, is the most depressed, anxious generation that there is in the world. And the science says the number one or two reason is they don't know their purpose. They don't know why. They don't know, they don't live in their purpose. So his whole podcast was about why don't they? Well, they don't because they're never bored, right? You're not bored because you constantly have this mass communication device, this mass disruptor in your hand, even to the point of if you're at a red light, what do? You
Check your
pick up
phone.
your phone and check a message, right? Like, we're never bored. So his point is, in order to know your purpose, you have to contemplate. Contemplate means like to think uninterrupted. So the time that you're talking about when you're at the gym or when you're in the sauna or when you're in the pool and you don't have anything going on. And that's when you start contemplating what your purpose is, right? So if you're listening, when are you bored? If you're not bored, you're not thinking, and there's so many writers in the world that claim, when they go out and take a 30, 40 hour long walk out in nature, they start getting all these thoughts and stuff. And, so I would 100% say the same thing, man. At some point in time in your life, be bored, man. Like, don't be plugged in, don't be listening, don't be, whether that's a walk or a swim or the sauna, which, I have one of those little portable, one of the cheap ones at my house. And I have found, man, what a great time to pray. When you go in that sauna and you're going to sit there for 10, 20, whatever minutes you are, like, to me, because I do have an issue being bored, that allows me the opportunity to, and I found that to be enjoyable in and of itself. So I love that. If I was to give you a struggling basketball team tomorrow, what are the first three things you'd do with that basketball team that hasn't had much success?
I can tell you've been doing this because that's a fantastic question. I get asked a lot of questions, John, and these are ones I've not heard before, which
Sure.
is awesome. I'd say I give them personal advice. My first year as a coach, I'm 26 years old. I go to the school who had never won more than 14 games. It's a terrible track record. It's the dumpster of the state in basketball. And I go to Christmas break thinking I was, going to be hot stuff at this time. And I was 0-9, and I'd never come close to winning a game. And I realized pretty quick how little that I actually knew. And the first thing is perspective. Like,
Mm,
you need to have the right perspective because you're going to be miserable all the time if you don't understand where you're at as a program. If you're making team goals and you're struggling, you should not tell your team your goal is to win the conference because the second you're 5 games out, they're going to be like, all right, we didn't get our goal. Your goal, the name of your podcast, should be to get better every day. So what does that look like? You want a quarter, and maybe it's in football, like your team is in a brutal rut. Maybe you just try to win a quarter. Like, what's your perspective? And I think if you can get a team to start believing in those little wins, that is a massive, massive head start. I'd say that a thing in every sport is master the fundamentals. I think once you master
mm,
the fundamentals, everything else gets easier. So the fundamentals of the sport is skill wise, the fundamentals mentally. If you're not good at those things, then you might as well not play. My son's in a flag football league, John, and it's the first year he's played football. And the coach has him going to block people with his hands over his crotch like he's setting a screen in basketball. And I was like, this can't be good. Like I'm all for flag football and keeping them safe, but let's teach the fundamentals well before we're doing
Sure.
reverse plays and trick passes and all that stuff. And then the last thing I would say, try, not everyone can do this, but I would try really hard to build a positive staff.
Mm.
Your freshman coach should be your one of your best people persons you have because they've channel funnel everyone through the program. Like if you get 30 kids trying out freshman year and you end up with 15 trying out sophomore year, your freshman coach did not really complete the task at hand, right? And then the JV coach to me is way more of like a direct disciple. Like I needed you doing being at my hip, watching and knowing what to do so you can prep them for varsity. But I think a lot of times we kind of flip those. I want a good coach to be at the freshman level. And then as far as assistants, people who are built into you, people you can trust. Um, I know not everyone can, and I hesitate to say because I know not everyone can pick. There's small schools out there, there's limitations. I would do my best to figure out a staff that is there to support the whole process.
Yeah. People ask sometimes, what do I think it takes to be successful and to have a great program? And I think there's three things that are necessary. Number one is the administration of the school that you're in, right? Like if they're not all in and they're not all about, being the best that you can be as a school, you're going to have issues. Number two is the assistant coaches. They've got to be great. Like, cause you can't do it by yourself. Nobody can. Nobody ever has. Like those guys have to be great. And number three, you do got to have some players, right? You do got to have some talent. You can be the best coached, best led school in the world without any players. You are still gonna struggle. I really liked, the achievable goals, right? Like, we really don't have goals. Like, I'm not gonna say we don't. Like, they're on a board somewhere, but like that's not a focus because our focus is to go out and live one day at a time and be the very best that we can be, period. Right. And how do we measure that? In 4 to 6 seconds, one play at a time. Can I play as hard as I can play right now, and then get ready to do it again and stack 4 to 6 seconds on top of each other? So having achievable goals, one of our goals, if we have one, it would be, like to play hard, to compete 4 to 6 seconds at a time, period. Like, and that doesn't matter who we're playing. It doesn't matter the outcome of the game. It really doesn't. And then the other thing that you said that I thought was really good was master the fundamentals. Now the one thing we do keep religiously is we have an objective board in our team room. And on that objective board, we got 14 weeks for 14 games. And we have objectives, okay, like win the turnover margin. If you win the turnover margin in high school football, you win 80% of the game. So if that's an objective, we're going to track it. And we're going to track it every single game we play. And then we're going to build practices that support the objectives. If turnovers matter, then we need to practice taking the ball away and we need to practice protecting the ball every day. It's a fundamental, right? Like, so we are going to track, what the fundamentals are. And, I think a lot of people mess that part up, man. They try to put in too many plays. They try to put, and block, tackle, hang on to the ball, and take it away. You know what I mean? Like, just figure out what it takes to be successful and do those things over and over and over and over, and have great perspective. I think that would be, I think those things that you kicked out there were really, really good. Well, Hunter, tell us this, man. When will the book come out? Where can we buy it at? Again, it's going to be called Care to Compete, which is going to be fantastic. Tell us that.
Yeah, so we're not to the pre-order phase yet, and they would say, "Why are you doing this then?" And I would say, number one, I really wanted to be on your podcast, and and number two, I do want to get attention to some other stuff we're doing too, because ultimately the goal for me is to bring coaches in and show them what a life with the Lord
Yep.
looks like, and to be able to steward those skills well. So we have a website called www.v3content.org. And we're entering phase two, and I've got some awesome college basketball coaches on board and a college athlete. And I'm actually looking for maybe some football coaches here that may be interested in participating as well. And what we're going to do is produce articles, a podcast, vlogs, social media videos, and things like that. And I want to be more than a book, more than a podcast. I want to produce leadership, faith content
Mm,
for everyone in sports at a high quality. I think the age of AI is coming, and it's going to be very literal. Anyone's going to be able to get any information that they want. So, what's going to separate you is how do you connect to the heart? How well
yeah.
do you tell stories? So that's what we want to be about. So you can follow us there. You can find my socials, Hunter Price, LinkedIn, X, TikTok, Instagram, all that stuff. And all the book links and stuff will be posted from there. And then it'll probably be on Amazon when it does come out. But I do want to add, I really appreciate you having me on. I really like that you are not shying away from your faith in this period of growth with your sports coaches and culture and things like that. Um, and I guess if my book does well, it doesn't do well. The only thing I really care about is the relationships made. I've met some really cool people during this. Like meeting you has been
Yeah.
fantastic, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. So you can't really put a price on that. So if you want to buy the book, that's great, and I hope you do. I'd love to come talk to your school at a conference. I'm lined up to speak at some conferences, some clinics, and things like that. But just the relationships I've made, John, have just really touched me and blessed me. So I'm pretty thrilled about that.
I love that, Hunter. And I will, for everybody listening, I will put all of his information in the show notes, the website, the LinkedIn, the book, the title. And then when it comes out, I'll post that. I'll talk about it on a Monday Mojo as to when it does come out so they'll know when to buy it. But the best thing to do right now would probably be to follow you on social media, right? And then, to jump on the website. The website is good. And, I think what you're going to do and what you are doing is putting a lot of positive things into the world, and I think that we need more of that. I spent some time with a couple of guys that I love here recently, and they're awesome. They have all types of great information. I'm like, y'all are going to die and nobody's going to know it because you don't write it down, you don't tell nobody, you don't share, you know what I mean? Like, man, we got to put some good stuff in the world because there are a lot of people like myself that need the good stuff. You know what I'm saying? So I appreciate you. I appreciate you being honest and sharing from the heart. There's two qualities that fires me up in people, and that is number one, being authentic, being who they are all the time, not fake, not on air, off air, being authentic. And number two is being willing to be vulnerable. If you'll do those two things, like I will follow you, I can assure you, because I think those two things matter. This is the last question before we jump off. And this, I should have sent you this question, okay, but I didn't. So you're gonna have to make this up on the run. Feel free to take a second. If there was one billboard, outside of Springfield,
Illinois.
Illinois, or Springfield, Missouri, I don't care. Put it on the busiest. Put it on the opposite side of the road as the Bucky's, okay? If you had one billboard and you could put one message on the billboard for everybody to drive by to see, what would that message be?
Jesus is hope. That's it.
Mm,
That's it. I've seen a lot of tragedies in my community. I've seen kids die. I've seen cancer. I've seen disease. I've seen it all. And the number one thing that's stuck in my mind, I went to the vigil of this high school girl who died in our community, and her dad walked on the football field a day after his daughter left the earth, and he gets a microphone. He's got tears in his eyes, and he's just said, "God is good."
mm,
And I will never forget that as long as I live. His daughter was 3 weeks from graduating high school. And why do I think he said that? Is because he has eternal hope that
mm,
no matter what happens, he's going to see her again. And you could have all the money in the world, you could have all the cars, you could have all the houses, you could have all the relationships, but you can't take any of it with you.
mm,
And if you told me, Hunter, you can have one thing in this life, what would it be? I would say hope. Because
mm.
without it, what is it? So um, that was a fantastic question, and I hope that billboard does go up.
Jesus is hope. No, I'm not going to top that one, man. That is a fantastic answer, and you didn't have to think very long about it, Hunter. Man, I really appreciate you taking and making the time. We will stay connected from this point forward. I can assure you, I appreciate everything that you're throwing out into the world. So thank you very much, for taking the time to come on today.
And thank you for having me. And I can't wait to interview next, which I think is probably going to happen.
I hear you. Well, I appreciate all of you that listen and follow the show. My cell phone email is always in the show notes. If you need me, holler. Until next time, adios, amigos. Appreciate it, man. That was fantastic.